So this is introduction to ethics. So let's first start with ethics. Ethics is derived from the ancient Greek word ethikos, meaning arising from habit um, or way of living. So this is basically how you would want to live your life. You have to have ethics. So a major branch of philosophy which focuses on the study of value or quality. It covers the analysis and employment of concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong, and responsibility. It is divided into three primary areas, which is which are metaethics. Metaethics is the nature of ethical terms and concepts, the attempt to understand the underlying assumptions behind moral theories. So, it is also the branch of ethics that seeks to understand the nature of ethical properties, statements, attitudes, and judgments. And we also have normative ethics. So, normative ethics is a study of ethical truths, what ethical truths there are, and how they are known. So, it's basically what they are and how they are known. Applied ethics. So, study of use of the ethical knowledge. So, it's on the name. It's how you apply ethical knowledge in your day-to-day use or in some scenarios. So, ethics is an area of philosophy considered as a formative science. It is concerned with norms of human conduct as distinguished from the informal sciences such as mathematics and logic, and empirical sciences such as chemistry and physics. So, it is a formative science, unlike other other sciences such as mathematics and chemistry and physics. So, philosophers attempted to resolve goodness according to two principles. Goodness is defined as whether a person's conduct is either good in itself or good because it conforms to a particular moral standard. The former involves a final value or sum bonum, the chief good, which is desirable in itself and is not merely as a means to an end. So, as I said, um, there there are two principles. Whether goodness is defined as whether a person's conduct is either good in itself or based on the moral standards of our society. In the history of ethics, there are three major standards of conduct, each of which has been projected as the highest good. Number one is happiness or pleasure, um, duty, virtue or obligation, and perfection, fullest harmonious development of human potential. So this is so in a lot of philosophy schools of philosophy, this is the goal or how you want to live your life. No, it must have happiness or pleasure, duty, virtue or obligation, perfection. So occasionally, principles are chosen whose ultimate value and preference may be resigned to accept all customs and therefore may develop a philosophy of prudence. He then lives in a compliance with the moral conduct of the period of society.
Now we will proceed to the history of ethics. Let's start with the hedonism. It is defined as the viewpoint in which the highest good is pleasure. Ito ang pananaw kung saan ang pinakamataas na kabutihan ay kinukonsiderang kasiyahan. The hedonist decides between two. first is the most enduring pleasures, or ito ang walang hanggan kasiyahan. And the second one is the most passionate pleasure. Ito ang madamdaming kasiyahan. Whether present pleasure should be denied for the sake of overall comfort, and whether mental pleasure is preferable to physical pleasure. It will depends. Now we'll go to the centuries before Christ. In the 6th centuries before Christ, the Greek philosopher Pythagoras developed one of the earliest moral philosophies from the Greek mystery religion, the Orphism. For an additional note, the Orphism was a mystery cult or a fringe religion of Greek society which promised its followers a better afterlife on the ancient world, believing that the intellectual nature is superior to the sensual nature and that the best life is one developed to mental discipline, according to Pythagoras. One of its main facets, the Orphism, was its obsession with the myth of Orpheus. So if you are familiar with the myth of a musician who went to the underworld to bring back his dead wife, this is where the Orphism's name derived from. While in the 5th century before Christ, the Greek philosophers known as sophists, who taught rhetoric, logic, and civil affairs, were skeptical of moral conclusion. They argued that gods could not be the explanation of human action. Many rhetoricians during this period were instructed under specialists in Greek rhetorical studies as part of their standard education. Now we will proceed to the those famous philosopher. To start off with Plato. According to him, good is an indispensable element of reality. Evil does not subsist in itself, but it's rather an imperfect reflection of the real, which is good. He claims that human virtue lies in the fitness of a person to perform that person's proper function in the world. In short, for him, being beyond being and knowledge, yet it is the foundation of both. The human soul has three elements, and each of which has a specific virtue in the good person and performs a definite role. The first one is the intellect. It is the knowledge or wisdom of the ends of life of a person. Then the second one is the will. It is the virtue where is our courage and the capacity to act of a person. Then the last one is the emotion. It is the self-control of our emotion or the temperance of a person. The supreme virtue, justice, is amicable and agreeable relation of all others, each part of the soul doing its appropriate task and keeping its proper place. Plato maintained that the intellect must be independent, the will seconds, and the emotions subject to intellect and will. So it must be connected, no? According to Plato, ang ating knowledge must be independent where we have to be open-minded in all ideas or in all perspective in a situation. Then the second na ang emotion, we should not let it freeze because emotion can result or can affect our decision. Then the righteous person whose life is ordered in this way is therefore the good person, according to Plato. Now, for Aristotle, according to him, he considered happiness as the aim of life. Happiness for him is the action that accords with the specific nature of humanity. Pleasure supplements such activity, but it's not principal aim. Happiness results from the distinctive human attribute of reason, functioning harmoniously with human faculties. So we have, as we all know, we have different meaning of happiness. Um, it may be a cause of a little things or big things around us. Like for example, as student having a passing grade in this college will result to our happiness. Aristotle held that virtues are fundamentally good habits and that to attain happiness, a person must develop two kinds of habits: mental activity such as knowledge, which leads to the highest human activity, and the contemplation, were those of practical and action, and emotions such as courage. So the definition of goodness and happiness of Plato and Aristotle have many similarities which we can tell earlier. And now we'll proceed to the other philosopher. According to Stoics, nature is orderly and rational, and only a life led in accord with nature can be good. The Stoic philosophers agreed also that because life is influenced by material conditions, one should try to be as independent of such circumstances as possible. So we should, according to them, we should not rely on the material uh, condition around us. And I think it is applying nowadays because some of the teenagers or person is being independent in the early age and not rely too much with the people around them. While in the 4th and 3rd century before Christ, the Greek philosopher Epicurus developed a system of thought later called Epicureanism, which identified the supreme good with pleasure, particularly the intellectual pleasure. But they regarded religious beliefs and practices harmful. Delikado daw because they preoccupy one with disturbing thoughts of death and the uncertainty of life after that. So for them, those practices of religious act can influence one person's decision like that and the uncertainty to choose it after that. Hindi sila naniniwala that na may siguradong hell or heaven pagkatapos ng buhay or sa pagkamatay natin. But on the other hand, in the Christian's point of view, it is exactly opposite because a person is totally dependent upon God and cannot achieve goodness by means of will or intelligence, not only with the help of God's grace. The most important Christian ethical belief is stated in that golden rule: so whatever you wish that men would do to you, do so to them. So it is completely opposite because, as we all know, Christianity, they may be many religions, but they are having um, one similarity, which is they are dependent into God and they believe into the religious belief and practices. That would end the history of ethics. We'll proceed to the next one.
First is the ethics. It is also defined as science of the morality of the human act. Next is science because of the systematic body of the knowledge meant to guide men in their pursuit of the good and happy life. And next, it is a therefore the practical science, not as speculative and science that merely and theorize. And next, it means to be the applied at it. It teach how men out of the life. So the example of this the personal ethics are ethical principle that a person uses when the making decision. They having the both personal in the profession setting. These ethics influence the various aspects of the person's life and help individuals develop their work ethics. Personal and professional goals and values. Individual uses their ethics to determine between right and wrong and influence how to someone behave in challenging situations. Each person to code for ethics and varies, but many people share common ethics such as honesty and respect. Next is the morality. So morality is a quality of the goodness and the badness of the human act. It also the rightness of the wrongness of the human act, the conform of do not conform to standard. The example of that is to the set of the standard that enable people to live cooperative in group. It was the societies and determined to be right and acceptable. So example of moral is Sun City, the loyalty and the respect, the fairness, care. And next, the human act. These are those that are done with the full knowledge and full willingness or deliberation. Next, act that are done without of the full knowledge or full willingness or deliberation of the both are term act of the man. And next, human act must conform to the standard to determine whether they are good or bad, right and wrong, or moral or immoral. So the example of the human acts is just like breathing, the digestion and circulation of the air in the body. These are the natural processes within the body of to continue the function without abusing of free will or will and reason. General ethics versus special ethics. So first, general ethics to concern an individual of what he ought to do to live in happy life in this world. And next, special ethics to concern the individual as a member of society. And next, all problems of the concerning a society and the social order are taken up in special ethics. General ethics versus special ethics example is general ethics about the principle of morality. It explains that norm with that which moral is significant of human act of determine. And next is the special ethics is the application of the principle of general ethics into the problem in issue to completing the person of account of his circumstance in life, for instance as a citizen, omnivore, or worker, wife, husband, or child. Next is the awareness. The weekend is opportunities, the work there, talk, and salt of the earth, and practice. So that's all po, ma'am.
The model of ethics. So first is facade. So a facade is the interior side of a building. The word facade is came from the French language. So facade is in the front of the building or a kind of a front of a people put up emotionally. So if you're mad but acting happy, you're putting up facade. So this word has to do with the outer layer of something. So one sense has to do with the front or outside of the building. So the facade, on the other hand, the meaning of facade has to do with people who are hiding something. In both cases, the facade could be divisive. So a building with a gorgeous facade isn't necessarily gorgeous inside. So a person putting on a facade is definitely putting on a front. The face they are showing to the world doesn't match how they are feeling. So the next is walk their talk. So consider the consumer's ethical intention, and ethically minded consumers rarely purchase ethical products. So your employees and the manner in which they are treated so are clear reflections of your company ethics and integrity. So walk their talk includes your hiring, selection, and leadership development practice and how you value your employees. So personal integrity focuses on individual values and is reflected in the way each a person handles his or her own life. In a healthy business environment, professionals' integrity must always be considered. So next is opportunists. Are people who see a chance to gain some advantage from a situation, often at the expense of ethic or morals. So opportunist is someone who sees opportunity ethically. Opportunists are people who see a chance to gain some advantage from a situation, often at the expense of ethics or morals. So, an opportunist sees every opportunity to improve things for himself. So, the next is salt of the earth. So, it is the most worthy of people, a very good or worthy person. If you describe someone as a salt of the earth, you have a lot of respect for them as as a type of a person who deals difficult or demanding situation without making any necessary fuss. So the next is types of ethics. So the first type of ethics is meta-ethics. So it is a branch of ethics that seeks to understand the nature of ethical properties, statements, attitudes, and judgments. So also meta-ethic questions, it describes, abstracts, and relates to a wide range of more specific ethical questions. The philosophical study of questions about the nature of ethical judgment as distinct from questions or normative ethics. For example, whether ethical judgments state facts or express attitudes, whether there are objective standards or morality. So, and how moral judgment can be justified. So the next is normative ethics. When we say normative ethics, it is the branch of philosophy that theorizes the content of our moral judgment, or as limiting case denies that any such theories are possible. So the position of so-called anti-theorist. So normative ethics, that is a branch of moral philosophy or ethics considered considered with criteria of what is morally right and wrong. So it includes the formulation of moral rules that have direct implications for what human actions, institution, and ways of life should be like. It is typically constructed with theoretical ethics or meta-ethics, which is considered with the nature rather than a content of ethical theories and moral judgment, and applied ethics or the application of normative ethics to practical problems. So the next is applied ethics. It is a distinct category of ethical philosophy that deals with difficult moral questions and controversial moral issues that people actually face in their lives. So for example of this, the moral issues is regarding abortion, giving to the poor, or sex before marriage, also called practical ethics. It is application of ethics to real world problems. So practical ethics attempts to answer the question of how people should be act in a specific situation. For example, it is ethical for business owner to bluff during negotiation with other company, or it is morally permissible for a doctor to engage in mercy killing when a terminal cancer patient begs to put out her misery. So, medical ethics, business ethics, engineering ethics, and like are all branches of applied ethics. So, applied ethics is more specific than normative ethics, which is a branch of philosophy that develops moral theories such as the ethics of care or deontology, about how people should behave. Practical ethics is also different from meta-ethics, a branch of philosophy that asks questions about the nature of ethics, such as what is morality. Some philosophers argue the real world ethics should start with moral theory, but finding agreement on which moral theory to apply can be difficult. With a practical approach of ethics, people don't need to agree on moral theory. Instead, they can agree to solutions to ethical dilemmas by removing the facts that related harms a specific situation. This is one of the key strains for the applied ethics. So the last is descriptive ethics. So descriptive ethics can be broadly be through of as the study of morality and moral issues from a scientific point of view. It can be thought of as the branch of ethics that attempts to develop conceptual model and taste those models empirically in order to enhance our understanding of ethical or moral behavior, moral decision making, and more broadly moral phenomena. So this area of branch of ethics might also be referred to as behavioral ethics. Descriptive or behavioral ethics then describes, explains, and moral behavior and phenomena from a social sign perspective or framework. On the other hand, approaches the study of morality or moral phenomena by asking different questions. In general, this approach attempts to describe and explain moral action, moral decision making, and moral phenomena. For example, how do you develop process or resolve perceived moral conflicts? What are the most important influences or causes of individual behaving ethically or unethically? What is the system of belief that guide individuals of groups in making moral choice that are observed? So, answer of these kinds of questions are descriptive ethics or explanatory in nature, as they use social science framework that often includes theory building and hypothesis testing in terms of discussing and engaging. This kind of question is business context that then can be through as business ethics, or the application of broader organization context can be referred to as descriptive organization ethics.
So in my part, I will discuss the code of ethics. But before I will go to further, let me define first the code of ethics and where it is referred. So, code of ethics refers to a written set of guidelines issued by an organization to its worker and management to help them conduct their actions in accordance with. So, code of ethics is important because it clearly lays out the rules for behavior and provides the groundwork for a preemptive warning, its primary values and ethical standards. Okay, let's proceed. Condition for making codes effective. There are 6 conditions for effective code of ethics. The first is there should be a valid motivation for introduction of ethics. Why? Because ethics is guides to tell the truth, keep our promises, or help someone in need. The second is broad acceptance within the company. So, what is the reason? Believe it or not, the broader our perspective, which is defined as a mental view, a cognitive orientation, a way of seeing a situation or a scene, the more truth we bring into our lives reduces our ignorance and enriches our lives overall. So, the third is continuous feedback is important. Why? Because it helps employees meet their goals, and continuous feedback eliminates the lag time of the traditional annual review, where employees are receiving feedback on events that may have long since passed. And the fourth is verification and control. New guidelines should be drawn up if the rules prove inadequate in any way. So, why verification and controls is important? Because it keeps us honest. It helps us prove we're really doing what we say and think we're doing. This is especially important when it comes to our most significant rest. So, the fifth is integration in a broad company philosophy because it can serve as a roadmap for organizations, helping the executives and employees understand the goals and values they are continually working towards. And the last is sanctions and control. The primary objective of imposing sanctions is to deter bad behavior, enforcing economic punishment on the targeted country. So that's the sixth condition for effective code of ethics. Okay, and let's proceed to the some code of ethics. The first is top management. Top management are senior management, executive management, upper management. Upper management or a management is generally individuals at the highest level of management of an organization who have the day-to-day task of managing that organization, sometimes a company or a corporation. The second is code of ethics. Ethical codes are adopted by organization to assist members in understanding the difference between right and wrong and in applying that understanding to their decisions. And the third is ethics committee. Ethics committees or similar institutional mechanisms offer assistance in addressing ethical issues that arise in patient care and facilitate sound decision making that respects participants' values, concerns, and interests. Okay, the fourth is ethics hotline. What is ethics hotline? An ethics hotline, also known as a compliance hotline, is an anonymous reporting tool that allows employees to report and possibly uncover illegal, unethical, and or improper conduct. Okay, so the fifth is ethics training program. Refer to the program which are designed by a firm to promote ethical behavior. And the sixth is ethics and law. The law refers to a systematic body of rules that governs the whole society and the actions of its individual members. Ethics is a branch or moral philosophy that guides people about the basic human conduct. And now, let's proceed to the difficulties in implementing code of ethics. The main difficulty with code of ethics is that they do not establish priority between norms and belief. There are three main areas that can create an obstacle to put codes into practice. The first is culture. And the culture as the arts that other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarding collectivity. The second is the design. Is a set of simple, concise, illustrated design requirements that are visual and numerical wherever possible to provide specific detailed parameters for the physical development of a site or area. And the third is enforcement. So, this is the last. Is the prevention, detection, investigation, and enforcement of violations of statutes or ordinances regulating public health, safety, and welfare, public works, business activities, and consumer protection, building standards, land use, or municipal affairs. So, okay, let's proceed to ethical issues. ethical issues is business manager face ethical issues that vary based on market and geographic region. So business have the responsibility to develop codes of conduct and ethics that every member of the organization must abide by and put into action. So for the fundamental issues is the first, diversity issues. Second, decision-making issues. And the third is compliance and governance issues. And now, the last topic of my part is the managing issues. What is managing issues? Ethics should be handled and managed properly. Many companies are management techniques to encourage ethical behavior at an organizational level. Many companies are various techniques of managing ethics like practicing ethics at top level, managing a special training on ethics, forming committee to oversee ethical issues, and defining and implementing code of ethics. Okay, so that's all of my part.
Next, the national difference in ethics. National difference in ethics means difference between two states or two places of one country. So in that, first, the culture. So means the arts and others manifestations of human intellectual achievements regarded of collectively. The next, the attitudes. So means way of thinking or feeling about someone or something. Then next, the religious belief means the belief in the religion's central articles of faith. Then next, the education means enlightening experience. Then the nature of government so means consists of the institutions that make and enact policies. The next, the competitive environment so means the system where different businesses compete with each other by using various marketing channels. The next is the work environment means shared values, belief system, attitudes, and set in assumptions. Then, international difference in ethics. So, international difference in ethics means difference between two different countries, value, belief, and culture. So, work environment of any country is also affect business while they are in multinational companies such as Reliance, Walmart, Amazon, Apple, Tata, and etc. So many companies form well-designed codes of conduct to help their employees. So two of the most prominent issues that managers in MNCs operating in the foreign countries face are bribery and corruptions and worker compensation. So ethical relativism. So ethical relativism is a belief that are no universal standards for what is right and wrong. Something that may consider right in one society could be considered wrong in another countries. According to the School of Ethical Relativism, so different societies, cultures, and countries put more or less emphasis on some values than others, so have different standards of right and wrong, have different social mores and behavioral norms. What is ethical or unethical so must be judged in the light of local customs and social mores and can vary from one country to another. So ethical universalism is also known as moral universalism. So is the meta-ethical position that some system of ethics or a universal ethic applies universally, that is for all similarly situated individuals regardless of culture, race, sex, religion, nationality, sexual orientation, gender identity, or any other distinguishing features. So according to the School of Ethical Universalism, so some standards of what is ethical and what is unethical resonate with people or most societies regardless of local traditions and cultural norms. So thus, common ethical standards can be used to judge conduct of personnel at companies operating in the variety of country markets and cultural circumstances. So these are the examples of universal ethical principle or norms. First is the honesty, trustworthiness, treating people with dignity and respect, to respecting rights of others, so avoiding unnecessary harm to workers or users of a company's product or services. That's all.
Now let's move to the ethical convergence. For the ethical convergence, it is defined as the set of practices of a uniform system of ethical codes in different countries that are culturally and socially different. As what have my group mate mentioned earlier, in the code of ethics, each country have a different ethical codes and practices which differ from each other. And kadalasan, ito ang nagiging sagot sa pagkakakilanlan ng isang tao dahil some person base your personality and your action or practices na pinapakita mo. And also, sometimes it cause a fight because we can't avoid no that there would be a similarity or yung iba is inadapt nila sa country nila na galing yun sa ibang country. Then if they will met and mention each other practices, then they will find it as a fault na may pagkakatulad, and they will start like you imitate this and that. So here are the reason. I have a list of reason for this ethical convergence. The first one is the growth of international trade and trading blocks. Then it increased pressure to imitate business practices. Varied cultural background employees require common standard, and an increasing number of business watchdog. So, kadalasan is nangyayari ito sa mga trading or selling something na business, ang pagpapalit, and they will get an idea about your ethical codes which they might find it useful minsan, then they apply it to their self, which kung bakit may kada country mayroon talagang pagkakatulad dahil napasa-pasa na sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo yung mga paniniwalang yon. And also, yung iba is it's because of the employees, like yung mga nag-a-abroad, nadadala nila yung mga practices and ethical codes ng kanilang bansa sa iba and na-apply at nakikita yon ng iba, kaya minsan is nai-influence yun sa mga co-employee nila. Next is the ethical behavior. The ethical behavior respects the dignity, diversity, and right of individual and group of people. Ethical behavior includes honesty, fairness, integrity, and understanding. The examples of ethical behaviors in the workplace includes obeying the company's rules, effective communication, taking responsibility, accountability, professionalism, trust, and mutual respect for your colleagues at work. We need to be ethical because it defines who we are individually and as a society. These are norms of behavior that everyone should follow. Our society might fall into chaos if we accept that each one of us could pick and choose what the right thing to do is. Kasi naman no, if walang ethical behavior or pagkakaisa, ang isang tao is expected na hindi magkakasundo ang bawat isa and palaging may gulo everywhere. Then with this behavior, we can maintain the peace and understanding of each individual. Now, for the last part, here are the advantage of ethics. The first one is significant improvement to society. The second is cultivate strong teamwork and productivity. The third is support employee growth. Then insurance policy. And the last one is avoid penal action, helps in quality management, strategic planning, diversity management. So, the most important benefit of a code of ethics is that it can foster an environment of trust, ethical behavior, integrity, and excellence. As you can observe, when I mentioned the five advantages, it can be observed that it is a positive one that makes the people unite with this ethic. Then, with corporate ethics as a guiding principle, workers make better choices in less time. This improves efficiency and overall workplace morale. When employees complete work in a way that is based on honesty and integrity, that benefits the entire organization. Having ethics is very essential to each one of us. For us to be organized or unite where fights can stop and problems can have solution. So that would end our report. I hope that you understand us classmates and mom. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, you can raise it now.